every year to tell us, "I told you so."
In 2025, the world will face dark shades from natural disasters, pandemics, famine, and the threat of war. This is exactly what Nostradamus warned the world about regarding the year 2025, which is fast approaching. In fact, he did not issue these predictions to frighten humanity, but to remind us to be more cautious about what is coming in the future. And 2025 is indeed a year when everyone must truly remain vigilant. World War III. On the other hand, the Frenchman predicted the beginning of a new world war, 79 years after the end of the second one. A confrontation around China is something that many geopolitical experts and journalists have started to see in the changing dynamics and rise of China as a global power. In the past, China has showcased its brute force several times in regions around the South, China Sea, and Taiwan, most of them through its naval ships. Analysts believe this may allude to the escalating conflict in Asia, with China involving NATO countries, potentially leading to a violent military conflict or an all-out war. Nostradamus also predicted something similar to this centuries ago. In one of his quatrains, he wrote about combat and naval battle. He said that the red adversary will become pale with fear, putting the great ocean in dread. Some think that the red adversary could be referring to China. He could well be referring to what happened in Ukraine, the China-Taiwan conflict, or Palestine. Some interpreters point to every earthquake, every political upheaval, and every attack on Israel as a sure sign that the end times are rapidly approaching. While the events may signal the approach of the last days, they are not necessarily indicators that the end times have arrived. The Apostle Paul warned that the last days would bring a marked increase in false teaching. The Spirit clearly says that in later times some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. The last days are described as perilous times because of the increasingly evil character of man and people who actively oppose the truth. Throughout Christian history, believers have speculated that the prophesied end times were just about to start. Some audacious ones have even set specific dates. People predicting end times dates usually focus on things like wars, increasing wickedness, and natural disasters. They talk about bad things like the increased fierceness of storms, the surge of killer viruses, severe famines and droughts, and escalating tensions between nations. There is no doubt that world war will be a part of the future. Christ plainly taught that there would be war prior to his return. Jesus foretold, "Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom." Similarly, Revelation 6:4 foretold a symbolic horseman representing warfare that would take peace away from the earth. To be more specific, the future does hold at least one more world war. There is nothing in Scripture that says there will be only a certain number of world wars. World Wars I and II are not explicitly mentioned in Scripture, nor is a possible third world war. It is only the last war that is mentioned in detail, which allows the interpretation that there may be others before the final conflict. So, although there will be at least one more world war, there is no doubt of the outcome. Righteousness will prevail as Christ, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, defeats all who oppose him. It is also worth mentioning at this time that following the 1,000-year reign of Christ, there will be another uprising which could possibly have the scope of a world war. Satan will be bound for 1,000 years and then released. Upon his release, he leads a rebellion among the peoples of the earth. Christ quickly puts down this rebellion and permanently judges Satan, casting him into the lake of fire as he did with the beast, Antichrist, and the false prophet. Wakeful nights. In 1554, Nostradamus announced that he would dedicate all his time and effort to writing a work to gather and synthesize the possibilities of the future of the human race. Nostradamus had a unique gift of prophesying the future, and he claimed that his visions of the centuries to come opened before his eyes during his nights of contemplation. He believed his visions became apparent in his mind and soul, so he penned them down in a book. The first volume of his work, Las Centurias, was published in 1555 and created a stir. One of the verses alluded to monarch Henry II and anticipated the circumstances of his death and subsequent bloody succession. 4 years later, the events were precisely fulfilled, and Nostradamus gained widespread fame. Years earlier, Nostradamus had suffered a significant personal loss when he lost his first wife and children. He then traveled through France, Italy, and Germany. During this journey, he had a chance to encounter 3 mendicant Franciscan monks. These monks were clad in rags but were fiercely proud of their faith and adherence to the poverty of Christ. Nostradamus surprised them by dismounting and kneeling before one of them, and then humbly bowing his head. The surprised monks urged him to get up, but the prophet refused, saying, "I must bow and bend my knee in front of His Holiness." The object of his attention was Brother Felice Peretti, who had led a miserable life as a swineherd before embracing the monastic life. The Franciscans left, but 40 years later, in 1585, Felice Peretti ascended the throne of St. Peter under the name Pius V, becoming the Pope. On the day of his coronation as the Apostle of Christianity, Pius V remembered the unknown traveler who had predicted his brilliant future 40 years ago. It was then that Nostradamus scholars had already understood that the prophet and visionary was the only person in his time capable of identifying an exceptional being, even though he had not yet had the opportunity to demonstrate his immense moral values. Pius V's papacy lasted only 5 years, but he accomplished a monumental task while remaining faithful to Franciscan rectitude. However, Nostradamus had died for many years when Pius V ascended the throne, leaving a legacy of prophetic visions and insights into the future. Rise of cryptocurrencies, collapse of banknotes. Nostradamus wrote a book with about 1,000 French quatrains divided into ages, most of which are undated prophecies for which he is famous to this day. One of them says, "Copies of gold and silver were inflated. After then, they were thrown into the lake. Everything was exhausted and dissolved by the debt. All scripts and links will be removed." We can understand that the copies of gold and silver are the banknotes, which, according to the prophecy, will lose much of their value because of their inflation and the extremely large debt all over the world. The quatrain has double reading. Nostradamus refers to the rise of cryptocurrencies during the year 2024. Copies of gold and silver can be considered cryptocurrencies that copy the status of precious metals as a reserve asset. And encryption is spreading at the speed of a Formula One racing car. New intangible coins will appear, and investors will flock to their digital world, as known as metaverse. Nostradamus warns about the collapse of fiat money, like coins and banknotes. Let not this prophecy be regarded as an exhortation to the market cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies were invented because banknotes have started and are still losing in value. Let's not forget that cryptocurrencies are wind-blown. They do not represent some constant value, such as gold. The moon at night on top of the high mountain. The young sage with the lonely brain sees it. He is invited by his students to be immortal. Eyes to the south, hands on the torso, bodies on the fire. This enigmatic quatrain is a prediction of artificial intelligence's rise. Donald Trump will rise again. A recent horrifying attempt on Donald Trump few days ago has shocked the entire world. In his first statement after the incident, Donald Trump said, "I was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of my right ear. I knew immediately that something was wrong, in that I heard a whizzing sound and shots and immediately felt the bullet ripping through the skin. Much bleeding took place, so I realized then what was happening. God bless America." Trump has also thanked the Secret Service and the law enforcement for their rapid response. He added, I want to thank the United States Secret Service and all of law enforcement for their rapid response to the shooting that just took place in Butler, Pennsylvania. Most importantly, I want to extend my condolences to the family of the person at the rally who was killed, and also to the family of another person that was badly injured. He was shot yet had the presence of mind to quickly gather himself enough to know to tell his supporters he was fine and show defiance in the face of danger. That's instinct. At the first public appearance since that unlucky event, Trump walking into the Republican National Convention to loud cheers. He had a bandage on his right ear. The blood-smeared face of Donald Trump, clenched fist raised against the background of the Stars and Stripes, may be the defining image of his campaign and an enduring portrayal of our times. A few hours later, in a brief press conference, President Joe Biden condemned the shooting and expressed sympathy to his opponent, calling him Donald, in a rare break from the animosity between the two men.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick. It's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country.
Mainstream political figures and pundits from across the political spectrum also immediately expressed concern for Trump and the other victims and condemned this act of political violence. Trump emerged from the incident triumphant. As security agents escorted him off stage, he defiantly pumped his fist in the air while his supporters chanted, "USA, USA!" The former president is basking in all the public and media attention. After the incident, Trump has called for unity and not allowing evil to win. He is a flawed person, and his prowess as a successful businessman is debatable. If nothing else, he has done well crafting an image of power, success, wealth, and fame. However, what happened on July 13, 2024 was unimaginable. The former president survived an accident attempt and escaped with minor injury to his ear. Unfortunately, there was other loss of life and other injuries at the event. Trump, the presumptive nominee for the Republican Party in U.S., has gained much sympathy following the incident, even from his harshest critics. When a person has a near-death experience, it oftentimes signals a turning point in life, a period of much reflection and renewed energy, direction, and purpose. Trump almost lost his life. A slight turn, an adjusted aim within millimeters, even a gust of wind, could have resulted in a very different outcome. And for that, he must be thankful to God. In the face of adversity, Trump displayed courage, strength, and bravery, urging Americans to fight for their country, with fist in air. With all of Trump's flaws, he could do some reflecting, clean up his act, and re-emerge polished and forceful. Many no doubt would forgive him, as no man is perfect. Getting a second chance at life can do just that. Trump could rebrand himself into a stronger candidate, one who is American first, brave and ready to lead and serve. He could also become more personable and even likable. He could position himself to be more purposeful, standing up against violence, hate, and bigotry. It could be an opportunity to lead his party to enact stronger gun laws in the U.S., something they have resisted for decades. God could be speaking to Trump to turn things around for his own good and those around him. Trump's legacy, should he become president, will be the costs of his long-held ambition to ramp up his trade wars and against the world, and particularly China. While it hasn't received much attention, a second Trump administration is threatening a high-stakes gamble to revive America's economy by erecting walls around the country's manufacturing base. The former president's great plan is to return America to an undetermined time, somewhere in the past when the country's industrial might made it a force to be reckoned with. This was a tragedy that was just inches short of becoming one of the darkest days in American history. It was also an inflection point for this year's presidential race and for the nature of our politics. The current and former presidents each have an opportunity to stop this escalation of tensions within American society and help ensure peace and decency prevail in American politics. The whole America should pray together for peace in all states, for the sake of its citizens. The prophecy of Nostradamus could come true, and everybody should pay attention and be prepared for what is to come. Americans should unite together. Let's pray the Lord returns. prayers, and believing in God will change every prophecy. The end times. In recent years, our world has been experiencing extreme weather events like never before. From record-breaking tornadoes ripping through towns to ice chunks falling off Antarctica due to rising temperatures, it seems like Mother Nature is showing no mercy. But what does Nostradamus, the famous 16th century French seer, predict about these end times and our current weather patterns? According to Nostradamus, 2024 will bring a big earthquake. Cataclysmic natural disasters. Nostradamus foretells a catastrophic earthquake off the coast of Japan, leading to a devastating tsunami. While similar events have occurred in the past, such as the 2011 disaster, the prediction serves as a stark reminder of the Earth's unpredictable nature and the potential for future calamities. There are also big volcanic eruptions of historic proportions. Nostradamus warns of a volcanic eruption, potentially the worst, since the eruptions of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD or 1631 AD. Such an event would have profound global implications, from environmental impact to economic and social disruption. One thing is clear: we need to take action to mitigate the effects of climate change and protect our planet for future generations. From reducing our carbon footprint to investing in renewable energy sources, there are steps we can take to make a difference. As we face the challenges of our current weather and the uncertainties of the future, let us remember the words of Nostradamus and strive to create a more sustainable and resilient world for all. The time to act is now. While Nostradamus's prophecies may seem bleak, it is essential to remember that the future is not set in stone. By taking action now to reduce our carbon footprint, mitigate climate change, and protect the environment, we can work towards creating a more sustainable future. Small changes, such as reducing our use of plastic, carpooling, and supporting renewable energy sources, can have a significant impact in the long run. Nostradamus's prophecies about the end times and our current weather patterns serve as a stark reminder of the importance of taking care of our planet. While the future may seem uncertain, we have the power to make a difference through our actions. By coming together to address the challenges of climate change, we can strive towards a better, more resilient future for generations to come. Chaos and hope. Nostradamus's prophecies have been fascinating for centuries. The meticulous fulfillment of his predictions throughout history, as well as the analyses conducted by prominent scholars, unveil the essence of Nostradamus's philosophy: that the atrocities and calamities of history stem not from divine predestination, but from humanity's insatiable greed for power and wealth. His prophetic work takes on a profound contemporary relevance, particularly concerning recent monumental events. One striking instance is found in century number 8, where Nostradamus appears to foretell the Bolshevik Revolution and the subsequent imposition of communism. Nostradamus's visions extended into the latter half of the 20th century with eerie accuracy. He predicted events like the Six-Day War, the Iranian Revolution, and the dissolution of the Soviet Union, along with its ensuing ethnic conflicts. His prophecies painted a grim picture of human conflict and suffering, warning of the consequences of continued ignorance. In Nostradamus until the year 2025, Jean-Charles de Fontaine observes that humanity's propensity for violence has reached unprecedented levels. He cautions against the collective apathy that allows such tragedies to unfold, suggesting that the current generation's disregard for prophetic warnings may lead to dire consequences. Looking ahead, Nostradamus foresees the advance of Islam into Europe, with major cities like Paris engulfed in turmoil. He also predicts the rise of a third Antichrist, symbolizing decades of global suffering and devastation. Ecological disasters, possibly exacerbated by human negligence, and the relentless spread of diseases like Ebola loom ominously in his prophecies. Nostradamus' grim visions starkly remind humanity of its capacity for self-destruction and the urgent need for collective action to avert impending catastrophe. He suggests that ignoring the warnings of true prophets may lead to irreversible consequences, with civilization teetering on the brink of collapse. In his predictions, Nostradamus saw the darkness and the light of humanity's future. While he predicted the advance of Islam in Europe, the war in Gibraltar, and the potential elimination of 2/3 of the human race, he also saw hope in the form of a prince from the main branch of the Bourbons who would bring peace. Nostradamus believed that the destiny of humanity is not predetermined and can be altered as long as there is collective awareness of the problems. He emphasized the importance of taking an active and positive role in addressing these problems and admitting mistakes. Nostradamus predicted a planetary conjunction of Venus, the Sun, Jupiter, and Mercury on June 4, 2024. He believed this conjunction would increase natural development and lead to a grand alliance in France. The sponge of the same from the Mediterranean would come, and that extreme remedy would extinguish the fire. An olive tree would be planted on dry land, a synonym for peace. Despite Nostradamus's warnings, it is essential to remember that the future is not set in stone and human actions can change it. We should work towards a better future and address our society's problems actively. The War Scroll and the 7 Wars to Doomsday. Nostradamus was a prophet, and his writings in the 1500s contained predictions that some believed had similarities to events in history. In the War Scrolls, he mentioned the occurrence of 7 wars. It is unclear if these wars have already taken place or if they are still to come. The Dead Sea War Scroll is a harrowing discovery that delves into the concept of mankind's destruction, from economics to military force. Composed of great detail and a foreboding tone, this ancient text provides insight into a cataclysmic event of epic proportions. Within its pages, the scroll elucidates the devastating consequences that befall humanity in the wake of this destruction. It vividly describes a world ravaged by chaos, where cities lie in ruins and nature lies desolate. The scroll warns of a future where hope is extinguished and darkness reigns supreme. The issue of growing income inequality and the economic collapse of 2008 are indeed significant indicators of the challenges we face. This widening gap between the rich and the poor has far-reaching implications for our society. It not only threatens social cohesion, but also hampers economic progress and deepens the sense of despair among the less privileged. The 2008 economic crisis highlighted the fragility of our economic systems and the repercussions of unregulated greed. It brought to light the inherent flaws within our financial institutions and the devastating impact it can have on the most vulnerable members of society. Unfortunately, the aftermath of this crisis has not resulted in meaningful reforms to rectify these systemic issues. Addressing the issue of income inequality requires a comprehensive approach. It necessitates the implementation of policies that promote fair wages, equitable distribution of resources, and access to quality education and healthcare. Furthermore, it requires holding those accountable who engage in unethical practices that exacerbate these disparities. We must learn from the lessons of the past to prevent further economic collapse and ensure a more equitable future for everyone. By prioritizing inclusive economic policies and addressing the root causes of income inequality, we can collectively work towards a brighter future where the gap between the rich and the poor is significantly reduced. As for whether we are currently heading towards an ultimate war that will bring an end to everything, it is difficult to say. The future is uncertain and unpredictable. While there have been numerous conflicts and tensions throughout history, it is impossible to determine if any one of them will escalate into a global, all-ending war within our lifetime. The enigma behind his prophecies. Michel de Nostradamus, also known as Nostradamus, was a French astrologer, doctor, and psychic who is best remembered for his stunning predictions written in enigmatic verses. Nostradamus initially became famous as an almanac writer during the time of the printing revolution. He was one of its first best-selling authors. Then he embarked on a history of the future, looking at everything up to the year 3797 AD, nearly 1800 years from now and beyond. For nearly half a millennium, Nostradamus and his prophecies concerning various places and periods have ignited people's imaginations and stirred fear. In his home in the town of Salon de Provence, this fortune-telling astrologer purportedly foresaw the future of humanity and the calamities destined to befall the world. Due to the ambiguity of his predictions, they were constantly subjected to new interpretations, depending on the historical context. As early as the 17th century, one of Nostradamus's critics, full of disdain, noted that people would invoke his prophecies when significant events occurred. For example, the death or success of certain personalities, fires in palaces or bridges. Similarly, we recall Nostradamus at the beginning of the 21st century in the context of skyscraper collapses, cathedral fires, or pandemics. The portrait of this very human figure, a man who liked to stroke his beard, sharply contrasts with the dark cliches of a prophet of future centuries' misfortunes. Nostradamus's own confessions and the opinions of his contemporaries indeed paint a complex picture of his personality. Nostradamus claimed that, like the Greek physician Paul of Aegina, or even like Odysseus, he traveled extensively around the world. In the epitaph he composed for himself, he boldly presented himself as the Titus Livius of the future. Each year his prophecies were feverishly awaited, but since they could cause public disorder, they filled Chancellor Michel de Hospital with apprehension. They also evoked ironic reactions, confusion, or admiration from the ambassadors of Spain and England. After a visit to Italy, he began to dabble in occultism. Due to its success, he decided to write one annually, filling it with predictions that increased his fame and notoriety. Soon, aristocrats and royalty began to seek his advice on the future. French Queen Catherine de' Medici became his most important benefactor and chose him to be her astrologist and seer. He famously predicted the horrific death of the Queen's husband, Henri II of France. After the king's death, she named Nostradamus counselor and physician in ordinary to her son, King Charles IX. He began his book, Les Prophéties, at this time. Nostradamus publishes the volume of 4-line poems called Quatrains. Readers of the time are confused by the author's use of multiple languages, word puzzles, and what was even then considered antiquated syntax. But perhaps even more baffling is the volume's title, The Prophecies. The Prophecies was initially met with outright skepticism and derision. Many believed Nostradamus to be either a fraud or mentally ill, possibly both. Nostradamus made a prediction about Henry II dying in a jousting accident, foretelling that a young lion would face the old in traditional combat. He shall be pierced through a gilded cage. The joust happened exactly as he foretold it. Both men had lions on their shields. Large shards went through the gilded visor of the king, one penetrating his forehead into his brain, the other between his eye and socket, destroying his eye. He died of infection of the brain 10 days later in agonizing death. After the king's death, his reputation as the seer of the future grew rapidly after the event, which was not necessarily a good thing at the time. It is well known that Nostradamus concealed the nature of his prophecies, which at that time was very politically incorrect and could have gotten him in a lot of trouble. He would have come into great conflict with the church if he put himself on a pedestal like Noah or Moses. Though he was afraid of beheading or incarceration from the church for religious grounds, he used word games and a combination of languages to hide messages. He recorded 942 poetic, prophetic quatrains in the book. He recorded the images he saw reflected in a small basin of water. Here is one quatrain that may predict the French Revolution. From the enslaved populace, songs, chants, and demands. While princes and lords are held captive in prisons, these will in the future by headless idiots be received as divine prayers. In 1789, the French population revolted against the monarchy. The peasants took control of Paris and forced their demands on the government. The aristocrats were locked up, their money and possessions taken, and then executed en masse at the guillotine. Despite the controversy, the Prophecies eventually became one of the most widely read books in the world. It both astounded and terrified readers with its predictions about dreadful events to come. Is it possible Nostradamus received his prophetic visions because he was in